keen to make sure that that's available for other members who weren't able to tune in today, to be able to forward on to them. I'm just going to say a few words before handing over to Renee, and just to reflect, I guess it's been a really significant year, which probably feels like it's stating the obvious for many different reasons. But I just want to reflect on sort of two mainly. One is those of you who were at the annual conference last year in Leeds will know that I announced that Dave Smith, our founder, was retiring later in the year. And I don't intend to embarrass him again, but I just wanted to reflect on some of that. It's a key moment when a founder sort of steps down. And I just want to sort of thank Dave very much again, and really highlight, he's given some reflections in the impact report that you'll be able to see. But just a couple of typical Dave Smith quotes that I've just pulled out. NACCOM's all about doing a lot with a little. I think we can all reflect or share in that. It's about sharing ideas, helping each other, and turning dreams into reality. What's changed is the way we're perceived. It takes time to forge a reputation, but NACCOM has done that by hard work and commitment to excellence. And I thank Dave very much for his vision and the values that he's set in place, because although NACCOM as an organisation has changed significantly since those early days that he started it, that vision, that mission, and the values that we hold remain the same. And so it was with some trepidation 3 years ago when we recruited somebody to take over leading NACCOM, but to Dave's great credit, and also Hazel's huge skill and ability to lead the organisation over the last few years, she's really built on the foundations that Dave and the team, many others, have contributed to in a great way. So I guess the other reflection is, as many of you will know, Hazel Williams, who's been leading NACCOM for the last nearly 3 years, also stepped down earlier this year, officially stepped down in July. And so that was, you know, I just wanted to thank her publicly very much for the amazing work that she's done, as I say, building on the foundations that have been laid, but also being able to develop a really strong staff team and raise the profile so that NACCOM is in a really strong place to have a significant influence and impact, not only in terms of supporting many members, and the number of members just continues to grow, which is amazing, but also being able to use that evidence base, as you'll hear later on, to advocate for change. So another significant moment, a change of national director. So it was with some trepidation we set about trying to recruit somebody new. And again, I'm absolutely delighted that we were able to appoint Renee Mann from post at Refugee Action, where she was the head of business development, but has been working for many years in the sector and knows it inside out and knows NACCOM really well. So I'm thrilled that it's already proving to be a seamless transition, and I know that NACCOM is in really good hands. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to her, who will chair the rest of the meeting until we get to the formal bit at the end, where I'll take over. So over to you, Renee.
Thank you so much, Julian, and hello everyone. I'm really delighted and honoured to be joining NACCOM as a new National Director and continuing the brilliant work that Dave Smith and Hazel Williams have enabled NACCOM to achieve over the last 14 years to end destitution for people seeking asylum, refugees, and those with no recourse to public funds. Your work has never been more needed. So first, I want to briefly introduce myself. Some of you will know me, others I'll be a new face. So I'm a lifelong defender of human rights, the right to seek refugee protection in particular. I began my career in Australia, where I'm from, and I've got a background in international human rights policy and social work practice. I came to the UK 16 years ago to join the London Borough of Lambeth's unaccompanied asylum seeking children's team. And since then, I've worked in policy, consultancy and business development roles to ensure people seeking asylum and refugees are welcomed and can live in safety and dignity, have access to justice and can rebuild their lives. I've worked with many NACCOM members and been inspired by your impact as a network of vocal frontline charities all working to end destitution for people in the immigration system. So I'm really delighted to be here. So next I want to speak about the NACCOM network, my priorities, and the presentation you're about to hear from the NACCOM team and the AGM. So people in our immigration system face enormous battles to be heard and to have their rights protected. And the NACCOM network is an absolutely vital community of organisations and individuals standing with them to end the dehumanising policy of destitution. The talented NACCOM team, Lucy, Jessie, Paul, Katie, Hannah and Angie, are absolutely committed to providing you with the development and advocacy support you need to boost your impact. By sharing learning, strengthening practice and influencing government policy, I'm confident that together, with our supporters and allies, we can end destitution in the immigration system. So my priorities are now, my immediate priorities are to produce our new strategic plan, secure the resources needed to achieve it, and to get to know all of you, NACCOM's members and supporters. I'll be agreeing the strategic planning process with the NACCOM board in October, and we'll be in touch soon about how you can shape our future impact. So now to our presentation. You're going to hear now about the learning from the annual member survey and the impact that the NACCOM network has delivered in this past year. Our presentation today is structured around NACCOM's 4 strategic goals, which are briefly, to support member sustainability and effectiveness, to amplify the voices of people with lived experience of destitution, to advocate for policy change and to create a sustainable organisation. The presentation will end at about 10 to 3, followed by a short question and answer session. Please post your questions in the chat function, and at 3 o'clock we'll start the formal AGM, which Julian will chair. So now I'll hand over to Lucy, who'll share with us the learning from this year's annual member survey.
I'm eating this mint thing because it helps with digestion.
Thanks, Renee. So what can we learn from the survey this year? Each year, we ask members to undertake an online survey about their work over a recent 12-month period. This year, we delayed launching it due to COVID, and we also shortened it considerably. We are so grateful to the 58 members who were able to complete the survey, knowing what a stressful and busy time it's been for everyone. For us, the hard work starts when the data comes in. This year, the picture has been more complex and nuanced than ever before. And whilst we see strength and growth in the network, which we want to celebrate, we know there have been significant challenges.
You don't really oil or that, do you?
To brush aside.
You paint or that.
These slides are a summary of some of the positives and challenges this year, with more detail available in the impact report. After the slide, I'm going to ask Jennifer and Stanford from CAST in Southend to unmute themselves and share some of their experiences over the last 12 months. So, some of the positives this year. These include the number of people accommodated, increases in housing stock and hosting capacity, and a rise in provision of legal advice. As you can see on the slide, our members collectively supported 3,373 people over 423,552 nights of accommodation last year. This is an increase from 3,211 people last year over 410,000 nights. This figure includes over 1,400 people who have sought asylum, of whom were appeal rights exhausted. Just over 1,100 people with refugee status, and 277 people with no recourse to public funds who had not claimed asylum. This amazing and important work has only been achievable through the dedication of over 1,000 staff members and 6,000 volunteers, making us a network of over 10,000 people standing strong together against destitution. Overall, rise in nights of accommodation and people accommodated have also been met with an increase in housing stock, which we can see has risen from 225 properties to 306 this year, and hosting capacity. So that's both the number of people accommodated through hosting schemes, which has risen from 886 last year to 986 this year, and the number of active hosts, which has risen from 675 up to 1,350. There's also been a rise in legal advice, both in-house and through partnership, with 13 members providing in-house advice and 12 members working in partnership with local legal providers. As a result of all of this hard work, 53% of people who were appeal rights exhausted and were known to leave member services this year went on to get leave to remain, asylum support or statutory support. Now on to some of the challenges. Challenges this year have included street homelessness, huge numbers of unmet need, and people being unable to move on successfully with their immigration cases. So this year we know that 82% of reported referrals or inquiries to member organisations were for people identified as street homeless, including those who were rough sleeping and those who were sofa surfing. Last year, this collective figure was 34%. An estimated 1,849 people were turned away from services because there was not the accommodation to offer them. This is an increase from 1,232 last year. Also, sadly, we know this year for the first time, we asked members, how many destitute people did you provide financial support to but were not able to accommodate, or did not accommodate? And the answer is 2,710. Finally, we know that the proportion of people who got leave to remain or some form of asylum or statutory support this year is roughly the same as last year, 53%, which is of course brilliant, but the number of people who actually moved on from services the number of people who moved on is actually fewer this year. It's 427 who moved on compared to 632 last year. And this shows the need for more quality legal advice going forward. Finally, to future challenges. We are mindful that this year's survey, partly because of the time that it was launched and other factors, we know that it doesn't tell the full picture of the impact of COVID-19 on the network, but we can see some of the key trends and issues that need to be addressed going forward. The main one is capacity. Services most immediately impacted have been night shelters, many of whom indicated in the survey that they'd already had to close or were having to close early due to the pandemic. There are other impacts as well for hosting schemes and for property schemes that we know make it very hard for members to provide the same, if not more, capacity than before. At the same time, changes in policy over the last 6 months have meant that there's not been such a need for capacity in some areas, but we know that this is changing now with the restarting of evictions from asylum accommodation and with the lack of funding for local authorities in some areas to support people with no recourse to public funds. It's therefore vital that we support members to meet need where they can, whilst calling for lasting change so that no one faces homelessness because of their immigration status. I'm now going to invite Jennifer, if you're there.
Yeah.
Thank you. To unmute yourself. Jennifer, you're based in Southend?
Yes.
And I just wondered if you'd be able to just in brief tell us some of the challenges that CAST in Southend has faced this year.
Yeah, as a grassroots charity, we struggle to get funding, so it's being a challenge to get recognized locally and for other organizations to buy in what we do, and for funders to understand our model. So, and we have had to stop all funding activities due to COVID.
Thank you, Jennifer. I wonder as well if you have anything that you'd want to say about some of the positives that have been going on this year. Stanford, are you available to share some positives?
Thank you very much. I'll start with one biggest positive, which had actually happened to CAST, is that all along we've never had the chance to rent commercial property in the high street. So we had moved into this new office where we are, after going through the checks, with the landlord and the landlord solicitors. But apparently today, we just got an email that we should vacate the office premises simply because we are not the type of client which the landlord wants. I've been thinking all along this whole morning, what type of clients does he want? It's simply because CAS is a self-user-led organization. It's led by experts who are probably immigrants and who are probably people whom they never expected that would rent a commercial property in the high street. So it's one side a positive that we sort of cast with the support from NACCOM, and being an affiliate of NACCOM, we have done something which was never expected in the United Kingdom, probably in Southend-on-Sea. But the thing is that it shows how much we have grown over this pandemic period. Over the pandemic period, we've managed to open up a 21-bed accommodation through our engagement with the local authority, where we are actually taking people with no recourse to public funding who have been housed in bed and breakfast. But we didn't take them just as manna from heaven. We had to make our demands clear to the local authority that we are only going to take third-country migrants into accommodation with no recourse to public funding before we touch EU nationals or anybody who are being affected with the concessions which are being put by the Home Office. So that started the beginning of talking issues affecting failed asylum seekers on a local authority level, that these people have been homeless, these people have been languishing in the United Kingdom ever since the asylum claims were decided, or when they were deemed failed asylum seekers. So right now we are actually talking with the local authority, and I would want to encourage every member of NACCOM that when we are thinking of launching a campaign on a local level, that come 31 December, COVID funding will go away. Anyone who has been housed by the local authority through the COVID funding should never be allowed to be homeless, particularly the failed asylum seekers. It is actually going to be cheaper for our local authority to convince Boris Johnson and his government that a sort of amnesty should be given to people with no recourse to public funding who are actually currently being supported by the COVID funding. So this is one positive thing which has actually come out and which we've already started working on.
Thanks.
And the other, thanks.
No, I was just going to say, just one other thing that I know you'd both mentioned was that you've been able to develop your legal advice this year. Do you want to say anything quickly about that, Jennifer or Stanford?
Yes, we've always had our Jennifer, I wanted to say something, or I can go ahead. We've always had our in-house legal support, and particularly with the help and training from Refugee Action, James Connors and the East team. But we're also working with the pro bono solicitors who are coming as far as Coventry, outside London, to come and do work for CAS. Particularly, they'll come one day, spend the whole day, and they look at 10 or 5 cases on us, which has been a very fantastic thing. And right now, because we have taken failed asylum seekers into our accommodation, it has improved in terms of engagement, in terms of preparing asylum claims and preparing further evidence to submit to the Home Office. This has actually made a very big impact, that we are working with the clients from in-house rather than where you see them, then they move out of Southend, you only hear that they are now living in Birmingham, foregoing the asylum claim and the assistance which they were having from us. So this is one big improvement, that when you work with somebody from in-house, it is easier to engage with all the other organizations and to get the help which the claimant or our clients need. So it has been a very good project that we've over accommodation, and then all the other things will easily fall, will come on the table.
That's great to hear, Stanford. Thank you. Jennifer, I just wanted to jump back to you very quickly. I know we're out of time almost, but I'm aware that alongside the kind of the broader organisational challenges you mentioned around funding, some of which we know have been at least temporarily perhaps resolved through the partnership work you've been doing with your council during the last few months. Is there anything else you wanted to say about sort of some of the challenges that you've seen in the housing team, in the housing sort of support work that you do and that you've seen sort of over the last few months? Just very briefly, if there's anything else you wanted to add.
Because of COVID, we actually got more phone calls from social services more than ever. So the work didn't stop. And we had, I had to take so many roles to deliver prescriptions, to deliver toys to the kids, to be the cleaner. So it wasn't just my role, but because people were working from home, I had to take so many roles at once. And during our phone calls, we received phone calls from people who were required to attend redocumentation interviews in the peak of the pandemic. The home office didn't stop.
Can only imagine how stressful and intense that time must have been for you. And Jennifer works as a volunteer for CAST, and I'm sure that many of the other volunteers that are sitting on this call can testify to just how busy and crazy the last few months have been. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing some of those challenges, and as well for sharing some of those positive developments.
The one thing which have actually convinced the local authority as well is that every person we have housed, we have noticed that issues of mental health among us asylum seekers is very prevalent and very high. So since the clientele, we are now living with them, we've asked social services to take adult social care assessments. Yes, they've been coming up with the funny conclusions, but we've pushed them that you can actually not conclude on one assessment. So we would rather have them as a decision not concluded, because we are actually observing the clients and we are actually feeding in more evidence. But wherever there's any immigration application, mental health issues are there, and the situation is made worse by the challenges of the pandemic.
Thank you, Stanford. It sounds like you guys are doing such important work in the South End. Thank you for sharing it with us today. I'm going to pass over now to Paul and Katie for our next part of the talk, and just ask that Stanford and Jennifer, I'm just going to mute myself now if you could do the same. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Paul. I'm joined today by my fellow network development worker, Katie Fawcett, who joined the NACCOM team at the start of the COVID lockdown, following our good friend, colleague, and founder Dave Smith's retirement in December. I will begin by giving a general overview of our network development work, after which Katie will talk about our specific support to members as a result of COVID-19. One of NACCOM's strategic goals is to promote best practice and support members in the establishment of sustainable accommodation projects that reduce destitution and homelessness. We do this by supporting existing member organisations to develop capacity and increase the effectiveness of their accommodation projects, by encouraging the establishment of new projects in dispersal areas, particularly where there is currently no accommodation for people left destitute, by developing regional hubs and supporting networking opportunities both within NACCOM and with, for example, the wider housing, homelessness and migration sectors, by researching and providing technical support and guidance on specific topics, and by supporting members in strategic, organisational and project review. As Lucy has already indicated, 2019-20 has seen significant growth in our impact. Over the past year, we have seen a 20% increase in membership from 100 to 125 members. New members include key regional refugee sector and homeless sector partners, including Refugee Action, Refugee Council and Crisis, and a number of London-based broader homeless charities, as well as new members in South Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland. The NACCOM network is extremely diverse, not only in its size, scale and reach, but also reflects the cultural and secular diversity both within the sector and in the UK today. Our members range from mainstream housing associations to specialist gender LGBT charities and projects birthed out of particular faith and local communities. We now have 69 full members delivering accommodation projects in almost every English region, as well as Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. We have 32 property schemes, 25 hosting schemes and 14 night shelter schemes. Our 7 twice-yearly regional hubs have become central to all that we do and now include some more targeted sub-hubs and more recently thematic hub gatherings of accommodation projects to share ideas, explore challenges and develop best practice. South Wales is an excellent example of members exploring problems and working to find solutions together. NACCOM members form a key component of the Welsh Coalition, which has been instrumental in securing support from the Welsh Government in commissioning a detailed report into asylum destitution, which was published in August, and will see the release of resources to support the development of hosting and other forms of accommodation across Wales. National asylum dispersal patterns have been changing, and one of the challenges in supporting and developing a network of accommodation projects is mapping these changes and then intentionally building links and connecting stakeholders and potential delivery partners in priority areas. With this in mind, we've started some important exploratory work in places like Plymouth and East Anglia, while continuing to have a particular focus on Northwest England, where there are a cluster of local authorities with dispersal rates of 900 to 1,000 and no established accommodation project. It's also important to reference here the ongoing challenge of a lack of legal provision nationally and how this impacts both on the establishment of new and existing accommodation projects. One of the highlights of this year was February's Ending Migrant Destitution Conference in York. This was co-produced with Crisis and brought together housing associations, NACCOM projects and people with lived experience of migrant destitution to explore existing areas of collaboration and how we can develop new working partnerships and the release of housing stock. We're currently working with Crisis and the Housing Federation on framing some key asks and hope to report further on this in 2021. Much of what we do is specific technical and project development support, both for existing and prospective members. Many of us on this call will have gone through the often steep learning curve in getting an accommodation project from initial idea to operation. What we are particularly encouraged by is the culture of openness and a willingness to share ideas and resources within our network. This sharing of knowledge and experience has helped us to produce some toolkits that provide accessible how-to guides with case studies that promote best practice and help new projects get established. We were pleased, therefore, to see that the new housing toolkit launched in October 2019 and also a revision of the hosting toolkit earlier this year. Additional work has also taken place to strengthen the resources we have available within the members' library. I'll now hand over to Katie.
Thanks, Paul. Hi there, I'm really delighted to join NACCOM and to be here today to be showing the work that the network development team have been doing in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. My introduction to NACCOM the week the country went into lockdown really enabled me to see and understand the depth and the reach of NACCOM's work on a national scale. The 4-month period from March to June 2020 has been unprecedented, with lockdown resulting in suspension or reduction of many of our member services. Delivery of our network development support changed, and through online platforms such as Zoom, it's enabled us to continue and be more connected and engaged with our members. Journeying with members through the COVID pandemic has been truly inspiring and encouraging, and we've been witness to so much generosity, openness and sharing in order to support one another, and I believe this is what makes NACCOM so special. The 3 areas we've delivered specific network development support during the COVID pandemic to members is firstly through our events. Initially we launched a weekly and now a fortnightly national members COVID call to share updates, foster solidarity and highlight responses to the coronavirus from across the network. We've moved regional hubs online and helped a focused virtual meeting in Leeds. We've launched 4 thematic hubs in June for members delivering hosting and housing, and night shelter projects, and for those members who usually run drop-ins or other frontline facing services. We partnered with a registered psychotherapist and provided 4 free Looking After Yourself webinars and 3 follow-up sessions for staff and members and volunteers from member organisations, and it was attended by around 26 people. In partnership with Wellspring Therapy and Training, we provided a free online mental health aid course, one of the first to be delivered this way nationally. And we've contributed to webinars organised by Homeless Link and our member Housing Justice to help mainstream homelessness charities, and in particular night shelters, to have a greater understanding of the alternative forms of accommodation provision across the NACCOM network. And we've also provided free one-to-one HR guidance.
You know I've got headphones in, right? Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. It's okay.
I'll just wait to take this back.
A NACCOM thing.
I'm just going to say.
Sorry. Yeah, we provided one-to-one HR guidance, coaching and advice for members delivered by trusted HR professionals. Our second area of support has been through resources.
Yeah.
Can I just interrupt? I think it's Zoe.
Yeah, sorry.
Zoe
I don't think so.
Zoe, could you just go on mute, please?
You could say I could also contact.
Hello? Yeah.
Hi, Zoe. Would you mind just putting on your mic? Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
Sorry about that. So secondly, the area of support through specific resources and guidance on topics including delivering housing and hosting projects during lockdown, digital inclusion. We translated guidance for housing and hosting to key languages. We did guidance on risk assessment and insurance issues. We did guidance around observing during lockdown, and negotiated deals with payment card companies and safely distributed to vulnerable people across the network. Advised guidance and risk management on the reopening of hosting services and drop-in centres. And thirdly, our strategic support, we work closely with partners Refugee Action on identifying specific needs and gaps in resources during the pandemic. We facilitate introductions and discussions between members and prospective members on possible collaborations as they look to plan for future accommodation provision. And we provided strategic input and diligence support to the Migration Exchange Respond and Adapt funding programme and are now facilitating payment of grants in partnership with Refugee Action. Finally, we endeavour to respond to all our members' requests for specific advice and support within a 24-hour period, and we hope to continue to do this as we venture on through the pandemic and beyond. Thank you, and I'll hand over to my colleague Hannah.
Hi there everyone. So yeah, I'm Hannah Gurnham. I'm NACCOM's Communications Coordinator, and I'm just going to talk you briefly through some of our year highlights and developments in the area of communications and media. You can have the next slide, and please. And just another click. Thank you. So firstly, we're really pleased to be able to share with you today our new impact report for 2019-2020, which you can review and download in the link in the chat function. The impact report is a really good way to find out in a bit more detail how our collective work and the work of the network is making a difference, as you've already been hearing today. You can see our annual survey data in more detail in the impact report, along with many other insights, so please do read it if you can, and we'll be producing a hard copy later in the year for distribution. Next slide, please. Thank you. So you've already heard a little bit about member communications from Paul and Katie, and you've heard how the network has grown considerably this year and now stands at 125 members. As our membership continues to grow, we also continue to review and develop the way that we communicate with members. One change that we made earlier this year in consultation with members, and this was just at the start of the pandemic, was to replace our online hub with a Google group. This was to improve information sharing, not just between NACCOM, the team and members, but also across the network as a whole, enabling members to communicate with each other, to start discussions, and ultimately to help support our collective work. And together with our regular Zoom meetings that were mentioned earlier, the Google group has been really instrumental in supporting our COVID-19 response, helping us to quickly respond to members' needs and gather key information for our advocacy and campaigns work. Next slide, please. And one more click. Thank you. This has also been really key in strengthening our influence with the media, particularly during the pandemic, positioning us as a leading organisation able to comment on and provide evidence and stories about experiences of destitution within asylum communities during the pandemic. And as you can see from the slide, we've been able to contribute some leading national newspaper and outlet coverage, and we continue to work with key journalists to highlight issues and amplify voices of lived experience, with the ultimate aim of pushing for policy change. Next slide, please. Thank you. This year, we've continued to work in partnership with our community reporting group, which is a network of people located throughout the UK, all of whom have endured destitution because of their immigration status. And that's really some of the group members here today. The community reporters' experiences and insights form a really valuable part of our policy, campaigns and communications work. Earlier this year, Jonah, who is one of our community reporters, spoke at the Ending Migrant Destitution event in York. Jonah can't be with us to speak today at the event, but he has shared his thoughts on why it's vital that people who have experienced destitution as part of the asylum process should have their voices heard. Just to say, please turn up your computer volume for this short film. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jonah. I am from Iran. I came to the UK as an asylum seeker in 2009. Not very long after I was in the UK, my asylum case was rejected by the Home Office, and I found myself homeless and without support. With the help of the church community and Open Door Northeast in Teesside, I managed to overcome the situation and receive refugee status after 3 years hardship. At the moment, I'm doing a teacher training course at Sunderland University, and my second child came to our lives 2 weeks ago. Since 2009, I have had the pleasure of working with different organizations and charities to help asylum seekers and refugees with their issues. More recently, I was working with Action Foundation Newcastle as an interaction drop-in coordinator. Also, I was being involved with NACCOM in different events to raise more awareness regarding asylum crisis and community report. This event helped me, and I am sure others, to share our experience as a refugee in the UK. It helped me when I speak about how much I was vulnerable, and my hope is to support asylums and refugees in the UK with the same situations. Also, I want to encourage them to speak out about their experiences too. In the community report event with NACCOM, it was hard to hear people had such a horrific experiences. The community report helps our communities to be aware of what's going on with the asylum system in the UK, and on the other side, help immigration to do the right things in the right way. This is my hope. I just want to say I am glad I am part of NACCOM's family, and I want to say thank you so much for listening to refugees' voices. Thank you.
We'd just like to thank Jonah there for sharing those really wonderful and interesting insights. And now I'm going to hand over to my colleague Jessie Seal.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessie and I'm one of the policy and campaigns coordinators at NACCOM, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the network policy response to coronavirus, our temporary successes, our ongoing challenges, and how we can make sure that our new normal is better for everyone. So firstly, I just wanted to acknowledge how difficult and at times tragic the past 6 months have been. As a network, we stand in solidarity with people who are destitute and support people to navigate a system that is oppressive and violent by design. And the reality of this is truly devastating at times. And the pandemic has thrown the impact of the hostile environment into sharp focus and has highlighted racial inequality that runs deep in Britain today. Having said that, I wanted to pay tribute to everyone on this call and beyond who've inspired me, certainly on a daily basis, with your commitment, your energy and your resistance. And I wanted to say thank you to everyone who has taken their time and who has shared their thoughts and their expertise with us so willingly in what has been a really busy and challenging time. So what has our work over the first 6 months of the coronavirus pandemic looked like? Well, as the reality of the pandemic began to become clear in early to mid-March, the NACCOM network and team realised that we had a role to play to try and get as many people into safe accommodation as possible. And the last 6 months have evidenced what we have always known, and that is that destitution is caused by policy decisions and that it is possible for different decisions to be made. So in the weeks before lockdown, we worked in partnership with network members and beyond to create 7 key recommendations for immediate policy change to protect people with insecure migration status who were experiencing homelessness. And these recommendations were noted, and we witnessed some unprecedented policy change thanks to our work and the work of many others. Ultimately, joint campaigning by the NACCOM network has helped secure the temporary suspension of evictions from asylum accommodation, the widening of access to Section 4 support, and the inclusion of people with NRPF in the Everyone In scheme. On a local level, the work of members has contributed to local authorities accommodating people who are appeals rights exhausted and others without leave to remain for the first time. And in April, after the first flurry of policy changes, we took the opportunity to try and widen these cracks and shared our expertise and evidence in new places. We improved our parliamentary work, we briefed more MPs and submitted evidence to multiple select committees and inquiries. We also made new links with local authorities and with public health teams, and we aimed to collect and elevate the many examples that were coming from across the network, both positive and negative. So although we faced significant challenges going into winter, I think we can say with pride that thousands of people were accommodated over the past 6 months who previously would not have been eligible for housing. Big campaigning wins are few and far between in the British migration sector. And we need to hold on to these temporary successes as a reminder of what can be done. We've witnessed the strength of communities and the possibility for significant change. And the fight is not over. We're mindful of the ever complex context that we work in as asylum policy comes under fire, as Brexit looms ahead. But bearing in mind how quickly changes have happened, we're determined to try and keep some of those changes over the winter period. And we are developing our advocacy asks and are currently focused on developing that the Home Office halt the plans to resume evictions people who've been refused asylum and further extend protections from evictions in the devolved nations. We're calling for an end to no recourse to public fund conditions, including for those without leave to remain. We're calling for a fully funded duty for local authorities to provide emergency accommodation to all those with nowhere safe to stay, regardless of immigration status. And we're calling to increase the move-on period for people with newly granted refugee status to at least 56 days. I think certainly the last 6 months has shown us how powerful networking can be. And together as NACCOM, we will continue to try and best use the opportunities that have been presented to us to be creative and to explore different routes for change.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jessie. So we've done a lot of talking now. It's over to all of you for some questions. Questions that could be about the survey, the impact report, really over to all of you. I'm going to do my best to see people waving, or pop your question into the chat, but or just unmute yourself and ask the question to the group. Any questions? No? Okay. No questions at all? Okay, perhaps there'll be some during the AGM. I'm going to hand over to you then, Julian, to kick us off for the formal section of the AGM.
Great, thanks so much, Renee, and thank you so much to the whole staff team. I just want to say, pay a huge tribute to their enormous work, and I know that you know, it's been a challenging time for everybody, and we've really tried to, I know the staff team have tried to respond extraordinarily flexibly to support you all. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the finances as part of our AGM, just for transparency and openness. And this is obviously just the headlines. Hopefully all full members have received a full annual report of accounts from our accountants. But just by way of sort of headlines, just to sort of pick up on a few things, you can see in terms of our income compared to last year, in terms of restricted funds, there's been a healthy increase. Most of the initial sort of 2 and 3 year funded or sort of commitments from funders when we started as a new charity have been up for renewal over the last sort of 12 months. And so I'm delighted that most of those have been renewed and in some cases increased. And I just wanted to say a huge thank you to all the charitable trusts that have showed continued sort of support for our work. It's absolutely vital and very, very greatly received. But there's been a really significant increase in, and if you can just go back to the income still, in terms of the unrestricted income, that's a significant jump up, and largely due to funding available, unrestricted funding available as a result of coronavirus. And so we've been able to secure some funds to ensure that we can support members more flexibly and other donations that have come in, which has meant that we've been able to be very flexible in the way that we've used that support. In terms of membership fees, that's largely as a result of the increase in numbers of members, so no significant sort of change there. We've obviously wanted to try and keep the membership fees as affordable and as low as possible to ensure that it's not a barrier for organisations to be a part of NACCOM. So, and again, conference and events income down a little bit, largely just due to being fewer events towards the end of this year, although I'll come on to talking about expenditure in a moment in terms of how that's affected. So again, just wanted to thank everybody who's on the line, who's supported us in some way, and all members obviously pay into a membership fee. It makes a huge difference in terms of our ability to support as many organisations who support more increasing numbers of asylum seekers and refugees to mitigate their destitution. So thank you so much to everybody who's contributed in one way, shape or form. In terms of our expenditure, you can see that staffing is our largest cost, and that has risen a little bit. So it's the first time we've taken on, when Dave retired, taking on Katie, we took on her on as full-time, whereas Dave was part-time. So that's had an impact, and some other staff have had increased hours during the course of the year. Been a bit of sort of to-in and fro-in with maternity cover, which has had a bit of transition time where there's been sort of more staff than we've had before, but that's been really vital and led to a really seamless transition for staff. Cost of fundraising is just a slight decrease, mainly Hazel's time. She's been incredibly efficient over the course of the last year. Other activities quite significantly lower, and that's largely because in the previous year, in 2018-19, we invested quite a bit in IT, and also quite a large part of costs involved, particularly with the network development workers, but all staff in one respect, is travel. And obviously a large part of this year we've not been able to travel, so that's quite significantly down. However, you'll see that there's quite a significant increase in annual conference and events. Last year's annual conference was the largest that we'd ever done, and we've done a significant number of, pre-COVID number of events that have required travel, and so there's a bit of a sort of one is up and one is down, so it balances it out a little bit. But there's more the hub meetings, there are more than we've had in previous years. The hosting convention was a new thing, both in the north and the south, as well as our numerous other training events that we've put on to support you over the course of the last year. And then in terms of support costs, not significantly different, but marketing and communications slightly up due to a significant increase in the number of publications that we've been doing. You know, we've done a bigger impact report, we've done a report on the Missing the Safety Net report, the Housing Toolkit, and many other sort of publications and, you know, literature that we've been able to use as material to be able to support you and to be able to increasingly lobby for changes to policy. So all in all, it's left us with a healthy position. We've increased our unrestricted reserves to a much better place for an organisation of our size, and funding is secure for largely for the current year, and there's a bit more to get in the following years, but we're confident that with Renee knowing so many funders, that's not going to be too much of a problem. I think what I would say is that we are also working really hard to make sure that funding for NACCOM does not compromise funding for members. And that's something we're very, very mindful of, and working very hard to ensure that we're only applying for funding where members would not be able to do that, because clearly it would be counterproductive to the whole sector, as if that was, you know, NACCOM was compromising your ability to raise funds. So hopefully we're helping by producing materials and also using our collective influence with funders to be able to use that relationship to highlight some of the challenges. And that's what today is about. And we will increasingly use our materials and knowledge to be able to try and encourage more people to fund this kind of work going forward. So hopefully, and as you've seen more recently with the Respond and Adapt funds, that's drawn additional funds in that we've been able to secure with partners going forward. So that's just a little overview of the finances. We're going to move on in a moment to talking about new trustees. But again, really just keen to hear any questions, whether that's about finances or anything that anybody else has said, whether that's been posted in the chat or verbally. Do give us a shout, because we're really keen just to have a good open dialogue and try and answer any questions or queries that you might have. So now is your time. So back over to you, Renee, to manage that.
I wondered, there was a really interesting chat by Nick Harborne, I think, is it, from Reading, around the role that NACCOM could play in leading collective lobbying with local authorities. And I wondered, Nick, if you want to speak a bit more to that. Maybe you and Lucy have had a bit of an exchange, but it would be good to perhaps share with that with the group.
No, I haven't had an exchange as yet. It's just no recourse to public funding. We've been lobbying for a long time in Reading, and I contributed to the homelessness strategy. I used to work in the homelessness field, so I'm sort of familiar with it, and just done everything we can to try and raise the profile of asylum seekers, refugees, people with no recourse to public funding. And lo and behold, the strategy's brought out, and there's not even a mention of refugee, asylum seeker, or no recourse to public funding. And it's just, it's not as if I don't know how to shout about the issue. And it's just, at some point, do we need to get together and just go to government or just say, look, this is not on. By default, you have to talk about refugees, asylum seekers, and no recourse to public funding. It's not acceptable not to include them.
Thank you very much for that, Nick. I wonder, Lucy or Jessie, did you want to come back and share a little bit more about what we're trying to do in terms of influencing local authorities and the government, central government as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Nick, yeah, I'm sure there'll be plenty of other people on the call that will identify with what you're saying. I think what Stanford at CAST shared just earlier on the call maybe is something to draw out from, and I know that there are other areas, other members in other areas that have seen progress with regards to inclusion of specific groups within homelessness strategies. So I think the positive is to say that progress can be made, but obviously every local situation is different, and every member relationship with that local authority is different as well. So I think it's certainly something that there's kind of general good practice that we'd be keen to kind of keep sharing and look at ways to do that. We're aware of some recent research that came out from the University of Wolverhampton and ASSERT and others, Project 17 and MRN, that was about local authorities responding to NRPF, and I'll share, or maybe Jessie can, if she can find it quicker than me, share the link to it in the chat, because that was really insightful in just the level of, so across different local authorities, the different levels of understanding about NRPF and the different levels of engagement with the issue, and how you just saw such a spectrum. So I think, just taking that from a kind of national perspective, what we can see is that it is a really real picture. And so what that means is that absolutely where there's good work going on, we need to share that and learn from it. And where there's difficult areas, I guess we could perhaps have more of an in-depth chat about how we might be able to help you with that. You're obviously in Reading, but there's other members in areas around Reading, Oxfordshire and down to Southampton, as well as over in parts of London. And so there'll definitely be learning that would be great to explore together. And there are letters that, particularly around asylum evictions, there's a letter we've shared which Asylum Matters have produced just recently on sort of against evictions from asylum accommodation, but that also cites the need for an end to NRPF. So it could just be that we can reshare those resources and think about ways that alongside sending letters, that ongoing dialogue, how we could learn from other areas where that's been developed really positively. But yeah, I just want to encourage you that it can change in some areas. That does happen, but it's definitely a long haul, and it sounds like you've been in it for a long haul already. So just support to you in what you're trying to do, and we'll do whatever we can to help you.
Thanks, Lucy. And that link is it now in the chat to the research that Lucy just mentioned. Thanks for putting that in there, Jessie. Do we have time for one final question, if there is one on the floor, Julian? Anybody else? Any questions or comments back for the team? There's a lovely one there from Will. Thanks so much, Will. The team are brilliant.
Can I ask another question? It's
yeah, go for it.
Similar to the local authority, just around mental health support for asylum seekers and refugees, and again, particularly of those who've been sort of victims of torture. And again, we've been lobbying for. I have to be careful what we say. We were sort of seen for the Forbury Gardens incident where 3 people were killed in Forbury Gardens in June, and the guy was our client, and it was just a mental health issue.
Right.
We've been lobbying on behalf of this guy for a mental health support plan for 3 years, and we just didn't get anywhere. And it just it's getting to the point where I don't know how or where else to go to or how to lobby. And we just, what I think we need to do is come together collectively and to force a wider sort of debate and push for recognition that it's such an important issue. And small agencies like ourselves and many others sort of on this call need to be able to draw on some sort of resource to help the most disadvantaged and vulnerable people.
Yeah, absolutely, Nick, and it's something that Stanford raised earlier in relation to the work that's happening at CAST as well. I don't have anything immediate to offer you right now, but I think it's something definitely that colleagues in Freedom from Torture and others have been working on a refugee council as well for many years. So perhaps it's something we could take away and come back to you on in terms of options around collective response. But I wonder whether Lucy and Jessie, is there anything specific that you can offer or you're aware of that others might be doing in terms of access to adult mental health services for people? Or collective lobbying? Lucy or Jessie? Yeah.
So again, yeah, not off the top of my head, and I'll be keen to kind of go away and think a little bit more about it. But what I suppose what I would say is that you know, what we've seen this year is a change of framing with regards to public health, which obviously is different from the specifics of mental health. But just to kind of think again about that, what we've learned this year is that really for the first time we've seen kind of conversations about destitution and homelessness framed publicly in the context of actually what is the impact on people's health. And so I think that's something that, you know, we're certainly keen on learning from and building on in our engagement, as Jessie said in her bit about, you know, we're having conversations now with public health officials, which we hadn't ever had before, even though obviously destitution and homelessness has always been, there's always a health impact, but it's that door opening opportunity that we've seen this year around kind of reframing things. So I guess I just want to offer that as being, you know, perhaps a first step towards that joining up of more of a joined up approach, because that's what needs to happen, right? It's nothing's in silo. And if someone's experienced homelessness and destitution, that will have impacts on all the other aspects of their life. And yeah, just to say, follow what Stanford said as well in that regard.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lucy. I'll hand back to you now, Julian, for the voting.
Great, thank you so much. So this is the sort of final bit of the formal AGM, where we have to, as a charitable incorporated organisation, vote for new trustees, but also all of our existing trustees have to stand for re-election at least every 3 years, or a third of our existing trustees need to stand for re-election every year. So hopefully if you're a full member, you'll have received information about all these trustees who are standing for election or re-election. But just to say, there's also Johnny Darling, Catherine Holcroft, Washington Alley and myself, in addition to Karen and Jochen, who are standing for re-election this year. So I just want to start by saying a huge thank you. It's a big honour, but it's also a big responsibility to be a trustee of any organisation, let alone one that has such an important role to play. And I'm really grateful for the wisdom and insight and input and time and effort that's put into to the NACCOM board by all trustees. So what we're going to do is just in a moment, I'm going to propose for each of the trustees to be voted on, and they're going to, everybody apart from Karen, who unfortunately is unwell and isn't able to be here, is going to say a few words just so that you can put a face to a name if you don't know them. And then the way we're going to vote, I think if we can look at the next slide, please, Ange, which is filling me with slight trepidation because we've never done this before. Normally we would just ask people to raise their hands, which is very simple. But there's just a few very clear things that we need to be mindful of. In terms of our constitution, we simply need a majority of people saying for or against in terms of proposed trustees. Only full members can vote. So you should know if you're a full member, that means that you're housing somebody who's destitute with no recourse to public funds, and only one vote per full member. So hopefully you've worked out, if there's more than one from your organisation, who is going to vote. And in a moment when we propose that, members will need to vote simply by saying for, against or abstain. And how we're going to do this is that I'll propose each member, and what we'd like you to do is to, at the time when you're indicated to do so, and not before hopefully, otherwise it could become very confusing, is that to type and use the chat function and type your name and organisation, so we make sure that we don't have any duplication and it's just full members voting, and then followed by for, against or abstain. So as you can see the example there, if it was me, it would be Julian Pryor, Action Foundation, for. Then Ange and Paul have the enviable task of counting all of that up whilst we hear from the next trustee, and about a minute later, hopefully we'll be able to announce the results of that vote. So hopefully that's all clear and it's all going to work like clockwork. There are 5 people. Sorry, I'll come back to that in a moment once I've had a time to read the comment. But as I say, Karen is not here with us, unfortunately. Her biography has been circulated beforehand. The only thing that she sort of would have pointed out if she was here is that she's actually been working in the refugee sector for 20 years now, and she graduated from her master's in charity resource management. And I would say, on behalf of the board, she's a founding trustee and brings a huge amount of insight, both from her role at Nottingham Aramathea Trust, but also much more broadly. And it's just a great value to have her on the board. So the way that we do to do this is actually I'm proposing on behalf of the board. We've had a conversation about who we want to propose, and so on behalf of the board, I'm proposing that Karen is elected for the next 3 years. And so if you could then cast your vote now by leaving your name, your organisation, and whether it's for, against or abstain. So we'll let you do that for about 30 seconds, and then I'll ask Jochen to say a few words. Thanks. And that will give me a chance to read some of the comments. So hopefully everybody's had a chance to do that. So we'll ask Paul and Ange to start counting, whilst I ask Jochen just to say a few words, perhaps for 1 minute, about why you want to continue to be a trustee, Jochen, and what do you bring to the board?
Thanks, Julian. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Jochen. I've been a NACCOM trustee for about 5 years, I reckon. So right from the early days when we were still a fairly loose network of organizations to the point where we became an incorporated organization. So in my day job, I'm the accommodation manager for Assist Sheffield. We provide all 3 types of accommodation that have been discussed today, so night shelter, hosting and housing. So as manager, what I really kind of put a big emphasis on and really enjoy doing as well is having those direct contacts with our clients. So I try and make sure that I don't stay in the office or at the desk, but actually am sort of out at our house at least once a week, or at the night shelter, as the case may be, which we're obviously not operating at the moment. So really kind of fostering those relationships with our service users, making sure that there's sort of a relationship and a basis for people to give us honest feedback on the service that we're providing, and also for service users to get involved in aspects of delivering the service. One other thing just to mention about Assist is that we are one of the organizations with perhaps the largest contingent of volunteers. So that's another thing I try and bring to the board, is sort of experience in managing and working with lots of volunteers in our organization.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Jochen. Really appreciate that. Before we ask, well, actually, no. So, Paul, have you got a result for Karen before we ask everybody to start casting their vote?
Yes, I have. I've got 15 for and 1 against.
Okay, so we just simply need a majority. So that means Karen is elected for another 3 years. Can you cast your vote for Jochen now, please, by putting your name, your organisation, for, against or abstain? Thank you. Okay, hopefully everybody's had a chance to do that. Great, thank you. Whilst Paul and Angie are counting that, can I ask Well, actually, before I ask Sarah Jane to come and say a few words, just to say a little bit about how we go about approaching new trustees. We've advertised for new trustees in the past. And the way that we do that is we invite people to come along to, well, first of all, we identify particular gaps so that we have a good balance on the board to make sure that we're representing members and have expertise so that it's a well-rounded board and can reflect our membership well, both geography, in terms of geography, but also in terms of size of organisations represented, and different expertise as well being drawn in increasingly. And then we invite them to come to 2 or 3 meetings, really just almost like a sort of probation period. They're encouraged to participate, but they have a voice, but not a vote, as it were, until they become a formal trustee member. And after that time, then the board make a decision whether they'd like to propose new people to the membership, and that's what we're doing here today for 3 new members. So Sarah Jane, perhaps you can just say a few words about yourself and why you want to become a NACCOM trustee and what you bring to the board. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Julian. It's really great to be here and meet you all. My name is Sarah Jane, and I'd like to be a NACCOM trustee because I'm passionate about ending homelessness in all its forms. This comes from seeing my dad face rough sleeping when I was growing up and seeing the wide range of negative effects that rough sleeping and homelessness have on individuals and families. I came across NACCOM during my time at the National Housing Federation, which is the membership organisation for housing associations, where I worked in homelessness and supported housing policy. Many of our members had worked with NACCOM members to deliver housing to refugees, asylum seekers, and people with no recourse to public funds. During my time there, I set up a network for housing associations working in this area to share best practice and encourage others to set up similar projects. Outside of work, I'm also a volunteer host with Refugees at Home. I can bring the policy and campaigning expertise, in-depth knowledge of the housing and homelessness sectors, as well as experience working as part of a member organisation. I'd love to be able to bring these skills to NACCOM and help work towards ending destitution.
Great stuff. So can you cast your vote now for Sarah Jane by saying your name, organisation, and for, against, or abstain? And whilst everybody's doing that, Paul, can you tell us what the results are for Yuccan, please?
It's unanimous, but I think I've got 13, but I need to just run. It could be 15. I need to. Unless Angie's got a different.
Got 15.
15, right? I've missed 2 going through the list, right? 15.
Great, thank you. Just give you a few more seconds to vote for Sarah Jane. And I'm delighted to invite Shukri. If you could just say a little bit about yourself as well and why you want to join the board.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shukri. I am an asylum seeker. I wanted to join NACCOM's fight to end destitution after becoming homeless myself over a year as an asylum seeker. I was supported by one of the night shelters that NACCOM supports, and I'm currently an expert by experience with crisis and refugee action. I volunteer for Coventry Cyrenians and Coventry Independent Advice Service. I've been supporting people in my community, advising on health issues, benefits and homelessness, and providing holistic support through art and well-being. And I really hope to continue fighting for the rights of asylum seekers and refugees as a NACCOM trustee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shukri. Great, so if you could cast your vote for Shukri to be a new trustee, again, putting your name, your organisation, and for, against, or abstain. And Paul, are you ready to tell us about the results for Sarah Jane?
I get 17, is that right, Angie?
I got 16. There was 2 votes for 1 member. Got 16.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Great, thank you. So whilst you're voting, last but not least, Phil, could you come and just share a little bit about why you want to join the NACCOM board?
Hiya, I'm Phil Davis. I've been involved in the fight against destitution for about 20 years now. I've been coordinator of Hope Projects for the last 5 years. Hope Projects is based in Birmingham. We provide housing, legal advice and financial support. Before that, I was 15 years with Refugee Action. I'm particularly interested in the connection between legal advice and housing. And I think the thing that I'm most excited about that makes me really want to be a member of the NACCOM board is to be able to contribute to a broad sector-wide campaign against asylum destitution.
Thanks so much, Phil. It's been great having all three new guys sort of joining us. So perhaps you can cast your votes for Phil now. And whilst you're doing that, Paul and Ange, can you tell us about the votes for Shukri?
I get 11, is that right, Angie?
Yep.
And 11 all four, I'm taking it.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And no against or abstain?
No.
Okay, great. Well, just while Paul and Ange are just counting up the votes for Phil, I think one of the things that we also wanted to look at is any gaps that there might be in the board going forward. And I think David asked what's the maximum number of board members. It's actually 15, so we've got plenty more room for additional people. And so at our next board meeting, we're going to be looking at whether there are additional strengths or additional support that is needed at the board level. We always want to have a majority of board members who are leading or deeply connected with a particular member organisation to make sure that members are represented very strongly at the board, both small and large and across the country. But we're also wanting other expertise as well, and that's something that we're going to be looking at. So watch this space for gaps. We'll advertise particular gaps that we want to fill. So if you're interested in that, we'd be delighted to hear from you in the near future. So Paul, have you got the results for Phil?
17, Angie, is that right?
Yeah, that's what I make it, yeah.
Great.
Fantastic, full house. Thank you so much. I'm sorry we've run over a few minutes, but that clearly took a little bit longer than we expected. It went pretty well, I think. No major hiccups. I just want to sort of finish by thanking everybody for, all members, supporters, anybody who's connected with NACCOM staff. It's just, we can only do this by working together. And it's that collective input. And I think one of the things I've just been blown away with, just sort of reading the impact report and hearing the presentations, is what a collective strength there is being together, and how much we need to use that now more than ever, perhaps. And so whilst there's great challenges ahead, I'm also really excited and optimistic about the difference that we can make, both on the ground in terms of the numbers of people who need our support, but also increasingly trying to lobby to end destitution. So thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for tuning in for the last sort of hour and a bit to hear about what's going on, and for your continued support. Thanks now. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you
Bye.
too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Our pleasure. Thanks for coming.
you.